Hi everyone, I'm Gary Null. We have an empowerment hour today. We're going to learn about how phytoestrogenic effects of fenugreek seed extract helps ameliorate leg pain and vasomotor symptoms in postmenopausal women from the Leeds Clinical Research Center in India. Interesting, because fenugreek is not generally used in the United States, should be, and we'll give you that reason. A lot of other good results of studies today, including a study on fiber and how it treats rheumatoid arthritis from the Frederick Alexander University in Germany. We only use peer-reviewed scientific literature from respected institutions, and we have a lot of new listeners. I just was amazed at the numbers I was just given today. So we also deal with a lot of issues that are not being dealt with either at all or honestly with objectivity. They're very biased, either left or right, whatever their agenda. So today, we're also going to take on some additional issues. For example, I believe that we should finally say enough and confront the so-called stunning fragility and the vindictive political correctness of today's students and young people. They're arrogant, they're strident, they're aggressive, they're hostile. Here's the irony. They'll say college campuses should be a safe place where I feel comfort. And yet they'll get up there and scream and curse and demean people who are saying nothing. They don't want someone else to talk. They don't want to hear anything. It threatens their very existence to hear a different opinion. And these are the people who are supposed to know how to deal with the crisis we face. Exactly what have you done, young people? What have you actually done to change your lifestyle so we stop polluting the planet? Have you given up your cell phones, your laptops, those minerals that are extracted, the energy that it takes to produce those are contributing? Oh, you didn't realize that. How about all your clothes? Probably 90% of your clothes are made by slave labor in Bangladesh or in India or in South America. Did you ever think that maybe I should look at the tag to see where it's made and whether or not that country respects human rights and pays people a living wage or slave labor? Did you look at the box of white sugar and where it came from? Was it the Canary Islands? Was it Dominican Republic, where they use actual slave labor? When you go to visit like all of the completely clueless, brain-dead celebrities, when you go to Dubai for a conference, or the people on Wall Street, you do realize, don't you, that virtually every single building, every single brick, mortar, marble, everything in that country was made by slave labor, where they're brought in with promises, then their passports are taken away. So I'm saying I have thousands of examples I can give of the hypocrisy of those who claim to be wise, knowledgeable, and are strident, and we want our way, or we're going to burn the country down. Do you think you're going to burn this country down? You're not going to burn it down. You will try to burn it down, and we will be there to stop your worthless asses. Okay? It's time that those in this audience who have a brain, and most of you do and are very smart, you don't just sit idly by, especially the senior citizens. With the senior citizens, please do something that shows that you care about the world you live in before you pass. Because it's my personal experience, yours could be different, that once a person hits a certain age, if they're the average senior citizen, they simply become invisible to social causes. It is the exception that they are out there and contributing. Unless it directly impacts them, you don't hear from them. We should hear from them because they have a lifetime of wisdom and knowledge and experience. These are the wise men and women who should be leading, and other cultures do. So we don't have young idiots railing in the streets about something they have no knowledge of. They have no context to. I remember at Occupy Wall Street, another failure of this generation, I asked, you have legions of people from all walks of life who were there in the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the animal rights movement, the human rights movement, the apartheid movement against Israel and South Africa. Why not bring them in to hear what they have to say that could help? Oh, no, we want nothing to do with them. You all had your day. As if this is somehow a generational bias, ageism. But the seniors don't engage in microaggressions or cultural identity theft. They simply say, If you don't want me at your organization or your movement or your demonstration, or if I'm not the type of person that you feel should fit a profile, then fine, I won't be there. I'm not going to be at a place I'm going to be disdained because of something. Do you have any idea how fractured we are as a society today? And so as a result of this, and I think this is purely intentional, and as a result, tell me exactly. Call in today. Tell me what's being done to change global warming's outcome, which is catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic. Did you know that last week there were more fires in Siberia and the Great Boreal Forest and the Arctic than ever recorded? Did you know that we had the hottest day in recorded history 2 weeks ago in the Arctic Circle, which means that trillions and trillions and trillions, uncountable numbers of methane gas bubbles are coming up, which are magnitude higher in creating global warming, and that's irreversible. You didn't know that? Well, you're going to be impacted by it. What happens when Montana and South Dakota, Kansas, and Nebraska can no longer grow wheat or corn or soy because the soil is too hot, and it's happening now, or the rain is too heavy? So you see the important issues of getting our health back and getting our environment to work for us instead of we working against it. None of this is being handled. So on the one side, we have millions of people screaming about what they don't like and want to change everything, who have no knowledge of how to do it and how to do it in an appropriate manner where we work together. And we have another side of the balance where there's zero on dealing with social inequality, zero on feeding the hungry children in America, of which now number 17 million, zero on helping the 51% of the entire American population are now in dire poverty. That's 51%. Half the people in America are in dire poverty, greater than the Great Depression by a magnitude, and not a single thing being done. And zero about dealing with crime, but you want to get rid of the police. Boy, you must have slept all night to figure that out. And who are you going to call when it's you they come after? Zero when it comes to understanding how to deal with our educational system, which has failed our children. So on every important issue, we're not dealing with it at all, as if there's only one important issue right now. And so we're going to deal with that today, and then I'd like you to call in and share your points of view. All right? So that's where we're going. And I'm going to keep there. So at least this audience will be dealing with something that is relevant. And hopefully we have a lot of people in this audience. I know we do because you've come to demonstrations. I've held maybe 200 marches, multiple demonstrations against 5G, against global warming, against vaccine safety and efficacy, against the Federal Reserve, against the FDA, against the CDC. So you're there. But we can't stop because we put in our time at some point, because now is the time when there is no more time. Let's go to health. There are certain herbs that are extremely beneficial for our well-being. One is called fenugreek, Fenugreek. And the fenugreek seed can help us rebalance hormones. It's not the only one. Squall vine, dong quai, faux tai, passion flower. All of these are good, especially for rebalancing our hormones. And it's when our hormones are no longer regulated but dysregulated that we end up with what we call andropause, male, or menopause, female-based hormonal imbalances. And that can be everything from your hair falling out, especially around your outer eyelids or your outer eyebrows, thinning of the hair, gaining weight, yet you're not overeating, mood swings, lots of depression, insomnia, loss of libido, loss of energy, having sweats at night, no matter what the temperature. Those are some of the signs. So anything we can do before that can prevent it. In fact, in many cultures, including the Japanese culture, menopause is minor to non-existent. In America, it's major. We can thank our diet for that, and our lifestyle, and a lack of wisdom passed down, especially now when there is no overall generational support, one generation supporting another, where your kids spend some time with the grandparents to get that knowledge. And we should. But fenugreek, a popular spice, generally not in America, in this double-blind, placebo-controlled study, found that it really makes a difference. It can help you get rid of leg pain. And it can also help women overall with vasomotor symptoms in menopause. You can just take it as an extract. Now, also we're finding that a fiber-rich diet can help treat rheumatoid arthritis. Why? Well, fiber is a valuable part of a healthy diet. The largely indigestible food is a feast for your intestinal bacteria, which produce short-chain fatty acids from that fiber. And these short-chain fatty acids have a positive effect upon inflammatory diseases like rheumatoid arthritis is inflammatory disease. But so too is dementia and Alzheimer's from dementia. Anytime you have fibromyalgia, you have joint pains, you're also having brain inflammation. You just won't feel it. And what happens is, if arthritis patients eat a fiber-rich diet, this leads to an increase in the number of regulatory T cells which combat autoimmune reactions. In other words, reactions in which the body's immune system attacks the organism itself. And so they found that the more fiber you have in the diet, the more anti-inflammatory reactions you have. And this was published in the peer-reviewed journal Nutrients. Just remember this. Your intestinal bacteria play an enormously important role in triggering autoimmune diseases. These microorganisms, which account for roughly 2 kilos, that's 4.4 pounds of your total body weight, have to be well fed in order to keep the intestinal flora intact. In other words, they need fiber. A processed American diet is not fiber. That feeds the negative bacteria, toxic bacteria. You need the clean, healthy diet that feeds healthy bacteria. And so when you have an imbalance, alcohol imbalance, sugar imbalance, meat imbalance, dairy imbalance, fried foods imbalance, it's that simple. So anytime you create an imbalance in your intestinal microbiota, that's been linked to the autoimmune diseases that we now suffer from at epidemic levels, especially children. And this was published in the peer-reviewed journal of Nature Communications. Also today, a study links stress hormone, that's your cortisol, to higher blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. This was published in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology. And it documents a clear link between the stress hormone cortisol, cortisol, and higher blood sugar levels. This was done at Ohio State University. So, 2 things we should do. 1, if you have higher blood sugar or diabetes, then you should do more to de-stress. And that will help that. And then, of course, keep exercising, because exercise more than anything else will keep that extra weight off, especially abdominal fat. From University of Westminster in the United Kingdom, when you're listening to music in your younger years and teen years, that defines us forever. That's according to the research. They analyzed music record choices, and they found that the music that you listen to between the ages of 10 and 30 defines you for the rest of your life. That's why it's difficult for some people to enjoy music done at one time. And did you ever find it interesting? This is just one of those little asides, where let's say you're there originally for a great group. For example, let's just say the Beatles. And so now you're forever a Beatles fan. But let's say later one of the Beatles goes out, whether George Harrison, Paul McCartney was very successful on his own and with his other band. But let's say it's a different type of music. You're less likely to have the people who like the original music like the new one. Because I counseled some very famous singers. And one in particular sticks out because this guy had like one hit after another, after another, after another. And so he's sitting in my office, and we're going over something that would help him for his health condition. And I just stopped and asked, I said, why is it that I see so many people, yourself including, these golden oldie shows, but you've got the voice, you have the personality, you look great. Why don't you just produce new music? And he said, because we've tried it. All of us have tried it. Everyone I know in the doo-wop circuit has tried it. People don't want anything new. They want the old. That's where their memories are. And he said, we can play at the golden oldies forever, and people keep coming back. But you introduce new stuff, they don't want to hear it. And says that one of the proof is that after a lot of the concerts, in the lobby, they'll be there to sign copies of the new stuff. Nobody wants it. So this then ties that in, so that by the time we're 30, whatever we've grown up on, that's implanted in us. That's a part of our epigenetics. And therefore, that's what we want. Just something, I found that interesting because it tied in one of the questions I had for so long is, why is it that some people can't make a comeback if they still have their voice? And that is part of that answer. Anyhow, I'm sure there are other conditions, but that's one of them. And by the way, I'm sure that also is one of the reasons that people stick with certain habits over and over again because of what worked for them at one time. For example, when people get stressed, as a kid, your mom would always, or primarily your mom, would give you, something that made you feel a comfort food. And when I was growing up, it was apple pie, and if you were good enough, you got apple pie a la mode, a scoop of ice cream on it. And then the hot pie, you'd see the ice cream melt over, and that was especially delicious. I also remember when it was, I don't know if any of you remember this, but when it snowed, you go out with the first snow and you scoop up some, you go in, you put some vanilla in it, and you make snow ice cream. I don't know what else. I didn't see everything that you put in. I think we used to get fresh cream delivered by a milkman in the morning, and the cream was at the top. It wasn't homogenized, and that's what I like to put in my cereal. But there was cinnamon. So cinnamon is one of those comfort spices. But it depends. Each person would have had something different. That's why we rely upon our comfort foods when we get stressed. From the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands and Cambridge University in Great Britain, if you take vitamin K1 and vitamin K2, they both benefit your heart. So there is a causal relationship between taking low concentrations of the B complex, especially using then vitamin K, 1 and 2, and it can help you especially lower your risk of coronary heart disease. This is published in the peer journal Clinical Nutrition. Most people don't think about taking K1 and K2. You don't need much, 1-2 milligrams. And it is in most multiple vitamins. Just make sure it's in yours. Okay? And finally, 1 in 3 young adults may face severe COVID, according to University of California at San Francisco. But it says it's about obesity is a risk factor in a healthy population, otherwise healthy population, and smoking. So it's not as if all young people are, in fact, they're almost immune. They can pick up a small amount of the virus, but it's the least affected group in the population are young children and young adults, unless you're morbidly obese, unless you have what would be a triggering comorbidity. So one more reason why it's a disgrace that a nation should have as many obese children, adult 2 diabetes in our children, heart disease in our children, directly due to their lifestyle. And that's on the parents. So we need a whole new look at parenting and what went wrong and why. This article, by the way, was done at the Children's Hospital there. And so this was published in the Journal of Adolescent Health. So yeah, the average kid, you're going to be fine. But obese young kids, you're susceptible. And University of British Columbia found that a mom will create the bacteria for the baby so that they both share good bacteria, which then comes through breast milk. If you wonder why every culture in the world you'll find mothers kissing the baby. And well, that's bonding, that's maternal affection. And what is happening at a level that they may not be conscious of is that the mother, when she kisses the baby has a fairly sterile environment. Its immune system hasn't been built yet. But the mother's picking up the little bit of saliva, and then her own body is then taking that saliva and creating antibodies. And then those antibodies go into the breast milk, and then the breast milk goes in the baby, and the baby's immune system gets developed. So a healthy mother with a healthy pregnancy and healthy nursing and taking in the nutrients that the mother needs, these are all passed into the baby. One more reason to encourage healthy pregnancies and absolutely healthy breastfeeding for at least a year. And that way, you've immunized the right way your baby, and that can make all the difference in that baby's life. Oh, and for the person that asked a question about the dihomogamma-linolenic acid, or DGLA, your question was, can it kill human cancer cells? And the answer is yes. I found an article that was just a week ago in Developmental Cell, peer-reviewed journal, and the fatty acids can kill cancer cells, which is one of the reasons I've suggested people take your olive oil, flaxseed oil, coconut oil, because all of those have the capacity to impact our immune systems and can protect us, including against cancer. We are 22 minutes into our program. We're going to take a break, and when we come back from the break, we're going to hear about. Let's go to Jonathan Haidt. He is terrific, and I want to hear what he has to say, because let me put this in proper context. Do you remember around more or less 4 years ago, I came on the air one day and I said, I heard a conversation that to me was just bizarre. This woman was on television, and she was deadly serious. This wasn't a parody. And she was talking about how you can't change your baby's diapers unless you get permission, because then it's an assault of some type, and it's aggressive towards the baby's body. I'm thinking, she's crazy. There's no way in the world. Who would have her on? And yet it was very serious. And then the same person came back and saying, you cannot, in the middle of the night, begin to hug your husband or your wife. If you do, that's an aggression. And I'm thinking, is this person from New York? From California? You can say that crap and get away with it because they're nuts. But if you're from New York, you just look at this person, you're stupid, right? Of course I'm going to hug my partner, whoever it may be, wife, husband, or anybody else. That's part of what you do to show your love, not just with your kisses and your hugs. But then she said, you can't hold their hands if you're walking down the street. If you reach over and grab someone's hand and you didn't ask permission, that's a microaggression of some kind. And I'm thinking, well, guess what? So many people now brought that up. Now everything becomes a microaggression. Everything seems to offend everybody of their generation. And a whole group of these liberals, and having come from an extreme liberal background, as I have my whole adult life too, I just saw how corrupt the corporate liberal has been. Not the traditional, nor the traditional conservative, but what the politics and ideology, the politics have done to warp and pervert these causes. And this is just one extreme of all the things in the world you should be thinking about, whether you get permission to hug your loved one. You can't walk down the street and hold their hand till may I hold your hand? Wake the person up in the middle of the night. But then you have to apologize for waking up. That's an aggression. You woke that person up. You're defiling that person. They may feel threatened for the rest of their life because of something you did. I'm thinking this can't be controlling us, and yet this is the dominant voice out there. This is who you're dealing with now. And if you think there are a few of them, there are millions. And you think they're going to go away, they're getting down and dirty. They're now controlling the body politic. Yeah, and I can show a lot of ways. So we're going to deal with this. But we're going to have Jonathan Haidt, one of the best professors I know out there. He's going to take us on a little journey of how to deal with this first. Please stay with us.
How did we get here? This incident with Dr. Murray at Middlebury was not the first time this has happened. We're seeing this all over the place. This didn't exist when you and I were going to college.
No.
What has happened?
Well, luckily, we're not seeing the kind of violence at Middlebury or at UC Berkeley everywhere, but we are seeing this desire to shut down speakers who are unwanted. And I think there are three things that come to mind above all others. One is we are living in an era when you step away from campus, of increasingly partisan, polarized, vitriolic debate. So why wouldn't we see a heightened version of that on campuses, among kids who are at the most passionate phase of life? I think it's also important to note that this is the generation that's the everybody gets a trophy generation, right? So no one modulates themselves or thinks I should kind of retire in the public space, let other people have their say, because everybody it's very individualist sentiment like that. And then lastly, and Jonathan I think can speak to this much better than I can, there's not a lot of ideological diversity on a lot of the campuses where this is happening. And so the notion that somebody with a perspective totally contrary to your own deserves the stage, deserves to be heard, that's sort of going away because there's so little diversity and there's so little appreciation for that, really important ethos of education and of civil debate.
So what we're seeing in the last few years is the rise of a particular subgroup that is extremely passionate morally about equality, about fighting racism, and that's all great. But they've adopted a way that is kind of vindictive, that is all about calling people out. So people are afraid of them. And it's not just the students, it's actually the professors too. So even if it's only 5 or 10% on any campus, the fact that they can file charges against a professor.
Wow.
At NYU, we have a new bias response team. So any video I show, anything I say in class, if it offends a student, there's numbers all over in every bathroom urging them to call, report me. So that changes the way we teach. And then, as Frank said, if students aren't exposed to diverse ideas, then if somebody like Charles Murray comes, well, he spoke at Middlebury 10 years ago and there was no big problem.
After his more controversial book. He's since then, his 2012 book, Coming Apart, which is he was supposed to much less controversial. That's what he was supposed to be speaking about.
Right, It's quoted in opinion columns of the New York Times all the time.
Left and right.
Yes, that's right. And it's the biggest problem of our age. I mean, why did Trump win? It's the coming apart of the by class.
It is a minority of students and it is a minority of schools. But they do set the tone. And at those schools where this is prevalent, it's really, really pronounced. And we're producing graduates who have little sense of the true ideological, political diversity of American life. I went, within the last couple of years, want to be vague, to a very esteemed liberal arts college in the Northeast. And when I was there, the president had a dinner for me at the president's house, and all these faculty members went around the table and sang the praises of the school. And I heard about the affinity group they had for this group. I heard about XYZ. We got to the end, there were like 20 faculty members. At the end, they said, do you have any questions? And they were all boasting about what a diverse environment they had. And I had one question. I said, is there a group for Republican students? And they looked at me like it had never occurred to them. And there was one student there, and she said, I think there is, but they maybe have one member. Now, schools trip over themselves to get racial diversity. They give a lot of lip service to socioeconomic diversity, and some of them do better than others. But what about this whole other kind of diversity? How are we going to move forward as a country if many of our top schools are graduating kids who can't even begin to process how a human being could vote for Donald Trump? They need to understand who voted for Donald Trump and why, and that they're not monsters.
I think the best analogy here is to understand what's happening with peanut allergies. Why are peanut allergies rising? They've been rising at an alarming rate since the 90s. And so what do? I take my kids to school. We get these long lectures on how we can't have any peanut butter in school.
And I go to the Senate. If you bring them, you're basically expelled.
Yeah, that's right. Well, a report came out last year. Do you know why peanut allergies are rising? Because we haven't exposed kids to peanuts. Right. That's the reason they're rising. So the new recommendation is you got to give kids peanuts early.
Right.
So this is what we've been doing in the name of no, it's not even a metaphor. I mean, it's the exact same psychological process. So Nassim Taleb has this wonderful book called Anti-Fragile. Kids are anti-fragile. So if you're fragile, that means like, oh, if I knock this, it'll break. Don't knock it.
Right.
But anti-fragile, like your bones, your brain, your personality, you need challenges, you need setbacks. You need to experience exclusion and insult in order to make it to adulthood. And the biggest problem, I think, is the loss of unsupervised play. So Lenore Skenazy has been brilliant on this with her book Free Range Kids. You know, in our childhoods, after school, we spent time where there was no adult around. Right. But there was a real crime
No
wave.
after-school programming.
Yeah,
Imagine that.
Right.
You just have to come home and kind of figure out how to keep yourself busy.
Yeah. That's right. And so, but in the 80s, there was a real crime wave. There were anti-bullying measures. There was a fear of abduction. So for a variety of reasons, kids basically were never out of adult oversight. And now in many towns, you can get arrested if your kid goes to the park to play. Right. So, we can't be too tough on these kids. We have deprived them of experience, in the name of keeping them safe and happy and comfortable, we've deprived them of uncomfortable experiences with their peers. Mm-hmm. There's always an adult around. And so they come to campus. This is the last chance we could possibly give young Americans to learn to work out their differences. Right. And we don't do it. We have more and more deans and processes and bias response teams so that there's always an adult to call in to settle the problem.
This is the, to use the jargon of today, this is the helicopter parent producing the bubble-wrapped kid.
Right.
And when I did my college book about admissions to elite schools and all that, the complaint I heard most often from deans of admission, from college presidents at the very top schools in terms of selectiveness, was that these kids arrive on campus and they are overachievers by every metric that college is using. And the phrase that sticks with me is one admissions dean said, "I am always amazed by the stunning fragility of these kids," which is exactly what Jonathan was talking about. And so what do? We give them these safe spaces. We construct these affinity groups. And debate about that is so shut down. I wrote a column not long ago asking the question, all of these colleges that put so much effort into bringing in a diverse class, once those kids are on campus, what do they do to actually promote interactions so that you have diverse interactions
Imagine that.
Right, and don't affinity groups, don't safe spaces, don't those sort of work in the opposite direction. I was forwarded tweets where people were saying things like, "I never knew Frank Bruni was such a racist." I was a racist because, so you asked how do Jonathan's colleagues react to him. When I talk to people in higher education, he's a hero because he's bringing up stuff about free speech and ideological diversity that they know needs to be but they won't say that in the public square, or they won't say the same things he's saying because they're so worried about a kind of shaming that the left right now, sadly, seems to specialize in.
Yeah, and I think this is really crucial. Mark Lilla had a piece in the New York Times right after the election on the problem of identity politics and how this may have alienated a lot of people and contributed to Trump's victory. And the response from many academics was ferocious. One of his colleagues at Columbia, within a few days, had some essay basically linking him to the Ku Klux Klan.
Which is what happened.
That's right. But here's the point. So Lilla comes back with this brilliant point. He says, that's a slur, not an argument. And once he said that, I realized, oh my God, that is exactly what has been happening to me. I've been saying some pretty provocative things, beginning with an Atlantic article with Greg Lukianoff, and I keep looking on the internet for people who will respond to it, and pretty much nobody's arguing against me for anything I say. But I do get a lot of people basically saying, I'm a white male, or I somehow am winking at racism, something like that. So young people who go through these colleges, they're exposed to rhetorical training that prevents them from learning how to engage. They're trained carefully in how to basically discredit your opponent. Slur. Right. They learn to slur. They do not learn to argue.
So go look at the tape from Middlebury, and that's exactly what you see. You see students with their...
Okay, those are some ideas. But when we were all not paying attention to what they were teaching and how they were reacting, and not all students by any means, a lot of students go to school to learn. And a lot of them are much more conscious today that better learn the right career, and many students shouldn't go to college. I believe one half of students should not go. They should learn trades because there's a future in trades. There's very little future in most of the careers because of artificial intelligence and the visa applications coming in from other educated students in other countries, and transhumanism, and equity partners buying everything, and now they're going to buy up everything and close it down offshore to China. So people have no control over what's happening to the very industry. So look carefully. Don't go to school on impulse or because everyone else has. Do it for the right reasons, or find a way that you can be educated so when it gets worse, and it's going to get a lot worse. If you think what we've just gone through, wait till the fall when we have our second wave. Wait till we have more closings. Now it's political. It's not about health. We've already exposed all the fallacies from scientists and the good science, and I've got a lot more to do with that in a moment. But one of the most important books right now in America, and it's for right up at the top, bestseller on Amazon, other places. And I don't believe in book burnings. I don't believe in banning books. I believe that freedom of speech means you can put your thoughts down and people have a choice of reviewing, appreciating it, arguing it, or rejecting it. It's White Fragility is the title. And Matt Taibbi is the only journalist that I know that wrote a response to it. Now, of course, he's going to take a beating, in my opinion, because of this. But thank goodness for him. He stands beside Chris Hedges and Abby Martin and Professor Henry Giroux and a number of other people, Glenn Ford, for having the courage, no matter what the mob is saying, he's going to challenge them and she's going to challenge because they're on the right side of history. I'm going to read you Matt Taibbi's response, not all of it. And then you'll have a chance to call in. I'll give him my own comments on this. Why am I concerned about this book? Because now a lot of young white people are denouncing their whiteness. They're doing everything that is showing that they don't deserve anything, and as if somehow them being born with a white skin deprives someone who was not born with white skin of an opportunity, even though today you have more opportunity, more diversity on college campuses, many places in the workplace than ever before in our history. You see, I'm one of those people that have a lot of respect for those who were there before Martin Luther King. He was a third generation of civil rights activists, and before Maya Angelou, and before Angela Davis. And if you go back and study all these movements, you'll think, my goodness, we have made an enormous amount of improvement. You can't legislate hate away. You can only legislate so hate cannot manifest in any obvious way. But you really change the dynamic when you get people to realize how special other people are, how much you have in common, how much you can share, how much you can work together. What is the benefit of working towards a common goal where everyone shares in that? And that's what I've seen. Yet I don't hear any of the arguments out there about how much progress we've made individually or otherwise. And we should. That does not mean we don't have racists. We certainly do. And it doesn't mean that we don't have institutions that have been run amok. We have. But you can change those without the slurs in a more appropriate manner. But White Fragility is now the book. It's almost like a Bible. And it's now being encouraged to be mandatory reading in every high school, grade school, college. In fact, I recently had a discussion with a person who is a young person, 21, and who says that they have big issues with their parents because the parents fully embrace the White Fragility literature. And this person doesn't. And so here's Matt Taibbi's response. Quote, a core principle of the academic movement that shot through elite schools in America since the early 90s was the view that individual rights, humanism, and democratic process are all just stalking horses for white supremacy. The concept, as articulated in books like former corporate consultant Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, #1 on Amazon, reduces everything, even the smallest, most innocent human reactions, to racial power contest. It's been mind-boggling to watch White Fragility celebrated in recent weeks. When it surged past the Hunger Games book on bestseller lists, USA Today cheered, American readers are more interested in combating racism than in literary escapism, end quote. When DiAngelo appeared on the Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon gushed, quote, I know everybody wants to talk to you right now. White Fragility has been pitched as an uncontroversial roadmap for fighting racism at a time when After the murder of George Floyd, Americans are suddenly and appropriately interested in doing just that. Except this isn't a straightforward book about examining one's own prejudices. Have the people hyping this impressively crazy book actually read it? DiAngelo isn't the first person to make a buck pushing tricked-up pseudo-intellectual horseshit as corporate wisdom, but she might be the first to do selling Hitlerian race theory. White Fragility has a simple message. There is no such thing as universal human experience, and we are defined not by our individual personalities or moral choices, but only by our racial category. If your category is white, bad news. You have no identity apart from your participation in white supremacy. Okay, whiteness has always been predicated on blackness, which naturally means, quote, a positive white identity is an impossible goal. Let me repeat that. This is her words. A positive white identity is an impossible goal. I'm going aside now from Matt Taibbi. Let me put this even to a more defined notion. If you're white, you are born of original sin, you're a racist, and there will be nothing in your life that you can ever do that will allow you to be viewed as, respected as, or accepted as a human being, because you're a white supremacist racist. No matter what your family's gone through, if you're part of the Irish immigrants and you were the first slaves in the Americas, it doesn't matter. If you're poor and been in Appalachia, it doesn't matter. You're entitled and you're a racist. That's the message. Let's continue again. I want to make it clear what she's saying. Quote, DiAngelo instructs us there is nothing to be done here except, quote, strive to be less white. Let me repeat that. Strive to be less white. To deny this theory or to have the effrontery to sneak away from the tedium of DiAngelo's lecturing, what she describes as, quote, leaving the stress-inducing situation is to affirm her conception of white supremacy. This intellectual equivalent of an order by water, if you float, you're a witch, is orthodoxy across much of academia. DiAngelo's writing style is pure pain. The lexicon favored by intersectional theorists of this type is built around the same principles as Orwell's Newspeak. It banishes ambiguity, nuance, and feeling and structures itself around sterile word pairs like racist and anti-racist platform and deplatforming and center and silence that reduce all thinking to a series of binary choices. Ironically, Donald Trump does something similar, only with words like amazing and sad that are simultaneously more childish and livelier. Writers like DiAngelo like to make ugly verbs out of ugly nouns and ugly nouns out of ugly verbs. There are countless permutations on centering and privilege alone. In a world where only a few ideas are considered important, redundancy is encouraged. To be less white is to break with white silence and white solidarity, to stop privileging the comfort of white people, she writes. DiAngelo writes like a person who was put in a timeout as a child for speaking clearly. And then it goes on from there. The book's most amazing passage concerns the story of Jackie Robinson. This is what's interesting. For anyone in the audience who appreciates the history of Jackie Robinson or knows the history, which I'm sure many people do, including the people who grew up and still the residents of Brooklyn where he lived, quote, the story of Jackie Robinson is a classic example of how whiteness obscures racism by rendering white privilege, and racist institutions invisible. Robinson is often celebrated as the first African-American to break the color line. This is her speaking, by the way. While Robinson was certainly an amazing baseball player, this storyline depicts him as racially special, a black man who broke the color line himself. This subtext is that Robinson finally had what it took to play with whites, as if no black athlete before him was strong enough to compete at that level. This is the response from Matt here. He says, Taibbi, there is not a single baseball fan anywhere, literally not one, except perhaps Robin DiAngelo, I guess, who believes Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier because he, quote, finally had what it took to play with whites. Everyone familiar with this story understands that Robinson had to be exceptional, both as a player and a human being, to confront the racist institutions known as Major League Baseball. His story has always been understood as a complex, long-developing political tale about overcoming violent systemic oppression. For DiAngelo to suggest history should recast Robinson as, quote, the first black man whites allowed to play Major League Baseball is a grotesque and profoundly belittling. Robinson's story, moreover, did not render, quote, white privilege and white institutions invisible. It did the opposite. Robinson uncovered a generation of job inflation for mediocre white ball players and a dramatic example of privilege that was keenly understood by baseball fans of all races 50 years before White Fragility. Baseball statistic nerds have long argued about whether to put asterisks next to the records of white stars who never had to pitch to Josh Gibson or hit against in the prime of Satchel Paige or Webster McDonald. Robinson's story on every level exposed and evangelized the truth about the very forces DiAngelo argues it rendered invisible. It takes a special kind of ignorant for an author to choose an example that illustrates the mathematical opposite of one intended point, but this isn't uncommon in White Fragility, which may be the dumbest book ever written. It makes The Art of the Deal read like Anna Karenina. And there's more, but that's enough to make the point that I wanted to make. So I just wanted people to realize that this is now the new truth speak in schools. So imagine where this can go for a moment. Imagine you're a parent, and you're a good parent, you think. You're a helicopter parent, you're a bulldozer parent, you're a bubble parent, you're a my child is perfect parent. So you want the child to go to school to believe this, that if they're white, they're racist. What do you think that's going to do to a child's perception of themselves? What do you think that will do to any form of meritocracy that child may try to achieve in studying or in anything else they try to do in life? You're starting someone off with a belief that is not based upon reality, and yet that is the new norm, and now it's going to be in our school system at every level. My own thoughts on this are relatively simple. Ego identity, of course, is a conditioned illusion that we latch on to with a false assumption it is permanent and absolutely real. Rather, it is a result of numerous causal factors throughout the experience of our lives that manifests as something that is independent from past learning. Therefore, from a spiritual perspective, we identify the illusionary ego with the color of our skin, although it is nothing more than biomolecules of pigment that have no consciousness of its own. Our color is not who we truly are. So all the brouhaha about race, as Martin Luther King stated, is about differences that make no difference between, because there is no difference between what is ultimately essential, from which is our shared humanity, our shared ancestry, and whatever one believes is the spiritual component of ourselves that has nothing whatsoever to do with an ego or how we egotistically identify ourselves. While White Fragility completely ignores those spiritual truths and is illusionary because it takes appearances and casual factors as absolute facts, as if whiteness was an absolute condition and there is nothing else. It is based on scientific materialism, meaning reductionist psychological behavioral nonsense that should have been thrown away with Skinner's long ago concepts. So just be aware, throughout history, all it took was the wrong message in a wrong book, and suddenly a whole group of people can be identified as no longer sacred, no longer to be trusted, no longer to be communicated with. So we'll see what this does. and I don't believe it's going to be good for a whole generation. I'd like to believe that we've made a lot of progress. I know we have. But there's no mention of that because that would undermine some of the argument. Make the argument, which is a legitimate argument, that we should deal with real racism where we see it and when we can. But now everything can be folded into the argument of a microaggression or then casting aspersions if someone does not align with your argument. Screaming, berating, belittling, smearing, libeling, slandering, deplatforming. If that's the way you want to communicate in the future, just imagine what the outcome is going to be for society. Now, before I just was told we have someone on the line here. Oh, by the way, WBAI is going through a really rough time, and we want to help the station. Unfortunately, the station's not in a position to pay for all of its premiums, and therefore we're in nonstop fundraising, and I regret that. No one likes to do that. But here's what we're going to do. Coming in the last 2 weeks of October, I'm doing a new 2-week anti-aging clinical study. It will have the same identical components as the 9-month study. The 90-day study, or 3 months. That we've done twice in the last year. And it's only taking 2 weeks because of what I found was the limitation that caused it, and that was the age of the individuals and the reluctance to make the changes they needed and to surrender what was not working on their behalf and embrace that which is. So this one is going to be for people 35 to 65. So that is one thing we're doing. And this should be revolutionary. In fact, I talked last night with someone who is one of the leading anti-aging scientists in the world, and they thought it was a great idea. They're very excited about seeing this because the whole idea is how fast you grow depends upon how open you are to growing in that moment. But at the same time, the station wants to know, can we do a retreat? And since I'm going to be there and I don't have to take extra time, I said yes. So here's what you can do. One's for the people who are in the study. We're determined, can we change your aging at a younger age so you don't get old as you normally would? That would be terrific, right? And the other is people just want to come away and de-stress, detoxify, juice, relax, sleep, enjoy nature, wonderful lectures, counseling, everything you can imagine. Do as little or as much as you want. There's no fixed protocol. You'll be drinking a lot of juices, having wonderful vegan meals in a beautiful environment. And we will be and by the way, we were all in quarantine, some of us for 80 days, and not a single problem did we have. And we'll be doing the same thing. No matter what's happening in the rest of the world, we'll have plenty of good, healthy food, and we'll be healthy, and we'll be safe. So if you want to join us, and this is a fundraiser for the station, and we will be paying for the premiums early, so those of you who have ordered your premium will get it early. We have Luann Panesi on the line. She'll give you the number. And also Luann has someone who was at, I believe, one of our retreats. I haven't spoken with him, so let's go to Luann. Hi, Luann.
Harry, hi, everyone. Yeah, I believe we have Austin on the line. He was at our last retreat in the springtime. And boy, if there was ever a time for people to pull back and reflect and really learn to relax, it's now. And I've had a lot of people very interested in coming down to be with like-minded people, to sort out all the things they're hearing on mainstream media and really getting fresh perspectives about what they're doing here. This is the time.
By the way, Luann, one of the days, the entire day, we're going to be doing workshops on best places to live in America, around the world, what to do. We'll be showing people the hydroponic houses, the freeze-drying projects, that to show people what they can do in their own home or wherever they tend to move to. And so that'll be one of those days that people can attend or not, but it's going to be a lot of insights and a lot of information because people want to get off the grid and people want to get back to more rural, beautiful, tranquil, bucolic, safe way of living. And so that will be one of those days in that 2-week period. Give us your phone number real quick, and then we'll say hello to this gentleman.
surely. It's 903-881-7008. Again, that's 903-881-7008. Give me a call, and I interview everyone to make sure it's the right event for you.
I'm Gary Null. We're out of time, everyone. Have a nice day.